You are listening to the Good Girl Podcast. My name is Cameo King. I'm your host of the Good Girl Podcast. There wasn't a space for women to be themselves in every facet of their lives. The Good Girl Podcast was created to offer that space to have conversations with a gutted truth without restriction. Join us to unpack your own set of questions and confessions in this good and safe space. I'm so excited for this conversation because it is what our mission embodies. It is what the Good Girl Podcast is all about, having these conversations in this safe space, but having them with a gutted truth. Our goal with any conversation is to free you from bondage, right? To free you from a thinking that things have to be a certain way, things that keep you from being your highest and best self. And so this week, I think the topic is kind of sticky. At least it's sticky for me. It's icky for me. And so we're going to take our time. This is layered, but we're going to be honest. We're going to be real in this conversation. And the conversation is obviously, if you clicked on the title, it is about submission, right? Specifically, women and submission. I feel it. I even feel it in my hands and feel it in my throat and feel it in my gut. I do not like that word. But hopefully, even in this conversation, I'll be able to process a little bit more. I'll be able to heal a little bit more and understand where these kind of feelings come from. But I think no better person in the world to have this conversation with is my business bestie, Danielle Moore. I say this a lot, like I knew her before y'all knew her. Because she is nothing short of amazing. She's a licensed mental health therapist. She has her own practice, the Refresh Wellness Center, also Uncouched Therapy. She is also a psychiatric assessor in a couple of hospitals in the Dallas, Texas area. And the reason why I love to have these type of conversations with Danielle is because of not only the lens of a mental health therapist, but just the lens of just being real and being honest and being raw and not holding anything back. And I just think that that is a perfect conversation, especially to have it with your girlfriend, right? That one, she holds you accountable. So she know the back history of Cameo. And so she can talk about certain things that I don't think other people have the privilege to talk about with me. And likewise, so I'm really, really excited for this conversation. So what up, Danny?
What up, though? It's good to be back in the building. It's always good to have you. So I'm gonna hop right into this because I think this conversation could take a while and I just want to be efficient with our time. So when you first hear the word submission, what do you think? Being condescended to, loss of control, having to minimize and mute parts of myself.
And I think too, that's where my icky feelings come from, because that's what I think about initially as well. I also think about innocence and almost an erasure of who I am as a woman. I do not feel, I hear domination.
Entitlement.
Yes. Entitlement. I hear not being listened to or not being seen, heard, or felt. And if you are a man and you're listening to this, I think this conversation is beneficial to you too as well, right? Because I know these are very real feelings and hesitancies that women have when the idea of submission comes up. And they're connected to very real experiences. So please understand, this isn't just something we just thinking about or we just saw. These are connected to some very real experiences. And I'll share one. And I remember I wasn't even dating a guy. We were just kind of talking, I'll say early stages. And so really didn't know each other well. We're just trying to get to know each other. And he brought up the idea of submission. And I find that interesting too. But he brought it up and he asked me, was I submissive? And I asked him, I said, what does that mean? And he was like, are you submissive? I said, explain to me what submission from a woman means in a relationship. And he was like, well, you submit to my leadership. I said, well, what does leadership look like? Practically, I'm walking this path with him. What does leadership practically look like in a relationship? At what point in time will I have to submit to your leadership? Give me a real example. He couldn't. he said he did not have an answer. He was more so like, it's just because I'm the man. I'm like, and I'm like, no, really, I really thought he was playing.
That entitlement.
And I find it interesting that when I ask men that question, many of them do not have an answer.
Yeah, for me, I mean, there are so many examples, but I study and research people and relationships in addition to just being a person and having my own experiences. And I remember having an experience where a guy that I was talking to, we weren't dating official. We were going to the park and we had left, but we decided to pull back up. And I was like, I'm going to grab my jacket or whatever. It started to get a little breezy. And he was like, you don't need a jacket. And I was like, yeah, I probably do. I get cold. And so I hopped out and went in and got me a jacket and then came back out and he was like, you just hard-headed. That's wrong. That's what's wrong with y'all Black women. You don't ever listen. And so I was just like, where's Ashton Kutcher? Because clearly I'm getting punked. Like, first of all, who are you talking to? You tell little kids that they're being hard-headed. Like, don't talk to me like that. Mm-hmm. But he said that he called me hard-headed again. Like, and it was just no, no, you're going to do what I tell you to do, even if it's irrational, even if it doesn't align with what's best for you in the situation. You didn't want me, a person who has anemia, to go get my jacket because I be cold all the time. And just because you aren't cold or whatever your comfortability, it did not make sense. And you told me that I was hard-headed for going to get me a jacket. Like, make it make sense, bro.
And therein lies, I think, the heart of the issue. And we'll go a little bit deeper into this, but this idea that you just know better, and there's that you know better for me than I know for me, who has been living and existing in this body for however long, and you have no experience being a woman.
You have no experience being me, and it's also this, like, it makes you feel like it really is a situation where we experience gaslighting.
Yeah.
Where they basically tell you that they know your experience better than you and they know you better than you. And that's not what it is. It's that being condescended to, and it's like, hey, I'm an entire person. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what's happening with you that you feel the need to have this type of control over me, or that you need to gaslight, or what's going on with you? There's something going on here where you are, projecting some insecurities. And so you have this need to condescend to me. And that's something that you need to work out in therapy.
And I really enjoyed how you put it, that there's something going on with them, that there's a need to condescend. Because the other question I often ask is, why do you need someone? Why do you feel the need to have someone submit to you? Like, where does that desire come from? What is that desire rooted in? And I have my theories in terms of identity. I'll say this too, that the men that I've spoken to who bring up submission, in hindsight, are typically men who don't know who they are. Mm-hmm. And so, and let's be clear, I'm not saying this to like condemn men whatsoever. This is what I have observed, that the men who desire that in a way that I think is unhealthy, in a way where it affects me, like, just it's just a conversation that is riddled without love, right? When you're asking me about submission, are men who find their identity of masculinity in dominating women and controlling women, and a woman doing what they say, versus being in partnership with a woman and knowing if a woman, and I can only speak for me and maybe some of my friends, like, if I love you and I care for you, I understand we are in a partnership and there are things that I will do for the sake of the relationship.
So I agree with everything that you said. And I would add that what has happened and what I have seen and researched is that there are a lot of men who have bought into very toxic toxic ideologies about what it is to be a man. Mm-hmm. And if the only thing that you've seen around you, the only thing that you're listening to, the only thing that you are really putting stock in are broken men who mishandle and mistreat women, and that is, you know, who you look up to, that is who you ascribe to, that is the logic that you ascribe to, you know, what it turns into is a power struggle between man and woman, and a man feeling like, you know, you're a woman, you can't tell me how to be a man, I'm supposed to dominate, I'm supposed to be in control, because I bought into all of this, right? I want to say it was James Fortune. I think I saw him on an interview after he got divorced, and he was disclosing about how he was abusive, and about how, you know, there were a lot of things that he thought was just being a man that were mean and that were abusive, and that just weren't the right things to do. And he's like, you know, in hindsight, like, I can say these things now that I, you know, have gotten some help, you know, but I've destroyed my marriage. I mean, I was beating my wife. Like, you know what I mean? He disclosed some things, and it was good to hear somebody come back out and say, hey, I ascribed to some things that destroyed my relationship and that were really, really harmful, that were violent, you know, toward my family, and it cost me my family. You have decades and centuries untold of men who have normalized being, you know, mean, abusive, and violent toward women, and they ascribe that to just being a man. And it's toxic. And so when you have women who challenge that, you know, sometimes it's just like a questioning that makes you self-reflect. And then when you self-reflect, and it's like, well, I'm not wrong, I'm the man. And you drive home, you dig your heels in the ground on that. And it's just like, honey, that's not working for us. And in this situation, you're ascribing to something that literally is not working for you, and you're digging your heels into the ground. Make that make sense. What's going on with you? Who are you trying to impress with this toxic masculinity that you are ascribing to? Because it's definitely not me, the person with whom you're in the relationship with.
The person who you plan to live with, the person who you lay your head next down to, who has your best interest at heart. And I think it's interesting. I really believe that men probably feel the same way, that I have your best interest at heart and that I know better. But again, that connects back to who told you that? Why do you believe that that is true? It's so funny. And I wasn't even thinking about bringing this up. This guy that I did date, we got into it. And he was telling me about, he was like, you don't think I know women? I was raised by a woman. I said, what? I mean, sincere. He felt that because his mama raised him, he knew me. Sincere, which leads me to my next set of questions before we begin to unpack this. I think it's important to define submission, because you and I, we talked about how we hear it. And so I think there's probably a universal definition in terms of how society understands it versus how it looks practically in, I'll say, healthy relationships, right? And so when I think of society's definition of submission in society, like I'm including the church, right? I believe that whether we want to believe it or not, the church is very influential, whether you are connected to a church, whether you are not Christian, like how the church shows up and functions in this society influences what we deem as good and bad, moral, right, and wrong.
Absolutely.
So when I think of how society defines submission, I really believe it is always listen to and follow your husband and let the chips fall where they may.
I agree with that definition. That is definitely how society sees this.
I think that's it. And then you're not being a good Christian wife. You're not being a good wife if you, in a sense, buck back, if you push back on what your husband has decided is right, has decided the direction that the family should go or what we should do. It should almost be almost like teacher-student relationship. I say that this is what I desire or what I want or how I see the family going. This is how we should approach life. And you, being a good wife, you just take it and then you support until God tells him something, or until he falls flat on his face, or until, in a sense, it's too late. Or you low-key in the background trying to fix stuff, trying to put the fires out before the whole house burns down.
I would like to add that it's not just your husband, it's men. Women are to listen to men. The end. We are to listen to men. We are to cower to men. We are to defer to men. We are supposed to be validated by men. Everything that we say, do, our entire existence is supposed to be validated by man. We live in a very patriarchal society, and men reign supreme. And it is expected of us as women to always defer to men. Yeah. Whether they are our husbands or our brothers or our fathers or our uncles, we are not supposed to hold them accountable. It is not our job to check them or to reprimand them. And, you know, if you stand up for yourself, you're being disrespectful, disobedient, among other things. That has been going on for centuries untold.
Yeah. Which leads me to my next question, right? So we have a understanding of a societal definition. How do you think it is supposed to work, right? In relationships, or what have you heard in terms of this is how submission works in relationships, healthy relationships?
In healthy relationships, submission is a reciprocal thing, right? And in healthy relationships, I find that submission is not a word that's often used or thrown around at all. You know, when I am, you know, talking to clients and couples, when I'm doing couples therapy, where I'm seeing things be healthy is in the communication department, where the couples have decided that they submit to the mission of their marriage or what they agreed upon. And then as far as tasks and other things, you know, doing whatever whoever's area of strength is, right? And so it's not usually, sometimes it includes some traditional stuff, but oftentimes it includes non-traditional stuff where people are able to do what is best for each other in each domain. And so you have some couples where the husband is just a better cook, or the husband is better at cleaning, or just different tasks like that. Or you have, you know, couples where both of them are good at both things and they share the responsibilities, or they both work. So they pay for services to, you know, help support each other so that they can continue to have good communication and interaction in their relationship. It's a give and take. It's a constant evaluation of what's working for us. Yeah. It's not this idea of you do what I say because I'm a man. You know, it's this idea of I want to be with you and I want this relationship to work. So what works with us? What works for us without either of us having to sacrifice our authenticity to be a part of this union?
Yeah. And I think you said sacrifice our authenticity. I think that it is a fear. I know that's definitely a fear of mine, right? That who I am, I'm going to lose who I am. I'm going to lose my authenticity. I'm going to look up, and before I know it, I'm not going to know who I am looking in the mirror because I have followed these rules that someone else has established that may have worked for them, but that, and then in a sense, I'm not going to be a healthy whole individual. Neither am I really going to be beneficial to the relationship, right? Because I am not who you met.
Yeah. And
I can't fulfill my purpose and destiny because I am not who God called me to be, but rather I am in complete service to you. Mm-hmm. And let's be clear, I do believe that you should be in service to your spouse. I enjoy being in service to my spouse, but I know that there is a point in which that becomes like you dishonor yourself in that space. You dishonor who you're called to be. And I asked the question on Facebook. I asked couples, this was a couple years ago, but I asked them, I said, what does submission look like practically? Married couples only, married folks, like, what does it look like? And when I tell you, every single one of them said, it is submitting to our union. It is not submitting, man. And I think that comes with the reciprocating piece of it. Like, we decided that this is what we desire in our marriage. And so we understand that is going to it's tough for me, but you're going to have to sacrifice parts of yourself if we agree that this marriage is better for us together than we are apart. And that was the consistent theme, that we're submitting to the mission of our marriage. And I'm also assuming that mission was established together, that this is how we see our lives shaping up. And it can change over time, obviously, but for right now, this is how we see ourselves moving forward.
Yeah, I think, what I have learned and what I am encouraging is, that there is that couples are committed to evaluating regularly what's working for them and what's not. And if there is something that's not working for one or both parties, are each of you committed to doing whatever it takes to make sure that each other's needs are getting met? But first, by making sure that your own needs are getting met so that you don't have unrealistic expectations of your partner. And so there's a lot of that goes on in relationships where you expect for your partner to come in and be, this all-consuming person that meets all of your needs. And that's just not realistic. You have to make sure that your needs get met first, and that you are responsible for your own happiness and making sure that you have what you need. And your partner is responsible for making sure that their own needs get met. And then you guys decide collectively, what needs that you all are going to meet for each other, or what that's going to be like, without it being this lopsided thing, so to speak.
I think that's such a good point when you talk about discussing what needs you're going to meet, because I know for me, like, I'm a pleaser, right? I know that's a part of who I am, right? And I think for the most part, everybody is like, they want the person that they're with to be happy and to be satisfied and to be pleased with who they are in the relationship. And I think for some of us, we can go overboard, right? You say you like pancakes, cool. I'm going to, become a pancake chef, just so you're happy, and this is an expression of my love for you. But I think that when we talk about submission and that reciprocating component, I do believe, and you can push back on me, but I do believe that it is okay to prioritize your spouse's, your partner's needs over yours, but only, and this is where it gets sticky, only if they are doing the same. And that's a huge only, right? Because of life. That's a huge only. And I got this concept when I was sitting in class in seminary school, and they were talking about the role of like Jesus, the Holy Spirit, and God, and how it's a consistent laying down of wills. But at the same time, while you're laying down the other person's will, the other person's needs were getting met, right? And I think that can be applicable in a relationship. I think it's touchy. I think it requires a lot of trust. But the only way that I can really make this practical is honestly when I think about sex, right? If my job is to satisfy you and make sure your needs are getting met, and I do that, like that is my job. We have conversations, we have questions, whatever. Are you good? I expect the same thing, that it is your job that my needs get met. This does not negate, let's be real clear, this does not negate me articulating, these are my needs, not leaving it all up to him, and vice versa. And I think that is how I understand submission. That is how I think that it works, that you submit one to another. You're submitting your will one to another. And I think that is a beautiful thing. It's ideal though.
I agree. But the only thing that I would add is prioritize your partner's needs, but not to your detriment.
That's good.
And so it's okay to prioritize your partner's needs, but when you do it to your detriment, you will end up broken and bitter, and it will create conflict in your relationship. And prioritizing your partner's needs, it's usually you trying to, hotwire connection, genuine connection. And what it ends up creating is conflict. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to do that. It's not sustainable.
When you say hotwire, genuine connection, talk about that a little bit in this space. Because I think when we hear that, there may be some assumptions about what that means. Like when I prioritize your needs, I'm trying to hotwire a connection.
Not when you prioritize in general. It's when you prioritize to your detriment.
Yes.
Right? And so if you are physically, like, our bodies can't always function how we want them to function as women. They kind of do what they want. Our bodies kind of do what they want to do at some point in time. And if you normalize, since you brought up sex, if you normalize having sex with your husband and you don't want to, your body is going to physically start shutting down, and you're not going to, you risk conditioning your brain to be in a space where you are tense and where you are not associating sex with pleasure. You are associating it now as a chore, as your duty, and as your responsibility, which long-term causes intimacy problems because you don't want sex. And so it may start there, and it may, and so the quality of the sex may, decline because you are having sex when you don't want to, or you don't feel like you really have the capacity to do. Or let's just put it out there. Let's be real. Y'all had sex, been having sex, and your stuff just swole. It swole.
Yeah.
And so now continuing to have sex on top of that is painful. Mm-hmm. But you feel like he still wants to go, and you don't want, you start having these conversations or whatever in your head about not denying your partner. Mm-hmm. And that's what I mean by to your detriment. Well, this is now a painful experience for you. Mm-hmm. This is not a pleasurable experience for you. You actually need some recovery time.
And which brings us back around to the point when we talk about submission. Submission tells you these are your husband's needs. Submit to his desires and deny yourself.
And that's not denying yourself. Like you swole, girl. You can't.
When I say deny yourself, I'm thinking about deny what you need in that moment, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
You need to chill out.
And so if you go ahead and basically agree to, you give consent because you don't feel like you can say no, which is still textbook date rape. You don't feel like you can say no in the moment. Mm-hmm. And so you give consent, even though you are physically, having an issue performing, and you don't feel like you can communicate that with your partner. That's a deeper issue. You need, and so we kind of need to work through that. Don't set yourself up for failure in that way. Yeah. I am agreeable, and it is okay to prioritize your partner's needs, but not to your detriment, and not, to the point where it becomes harmful to you.
I just love how you emphasize that, like, not to your detriment, because I also think that we do things in relationships, and we want things, and we do them out of a deficit. Mm-hmm. because I didn't have this, I am going to go above and beyond.
Absolutely.
Because I didn't have people that were there for me, I'm going to make sure, to my detriment, that I am there for somebody else, right?
That's called a trauma bond. Go ahead.
Whether it is, financial detriment, emotional detriment, physical detriment, like, because people didn't show up for me, and say someone I'm dating or even my friends that I care for, they have an event across the country, and I know good and well I don't have time. But what do? Don't have time, money, or I'm just tired. But I still push myself. I get sick. I'll put it on my credit card, and I'm still present, and I feel justified in that. And then it sets us up for that expectation you talked about earlier. When they don't do it for you, you feel bitter. You feel resentment.
Yes.
And you still don't get your needs met.
And you kind of feel a little betrayed, because it's just like, I did all of this for you, and it's like, is this a transactional relationship, or, what kind of relationship is this? Did you communicate that you were doing that? Did you communicate that you were, going out on a limb, or did you fear rejection and you wanted to make sure that you remained connected? And so or did you fear abandonment? Did you fear, people weren't there for you, so you were informed by your trauma and you made decisions through the lens of your trauma that were to your detriment? Don't do that.
And this is why I say this submission conversation is layered, and to have to process all of that and in a sense gaslight everything that, like, that is emotionally taxing. That is psychological warfare. When you are processing all of that, but you have a partner who you believe the right thing to do is to be submissive to every whim, every desire, it as though he's God, right? And society supports this as though he's not human. And then also I think that submission isn't good for men either, right? Because it does set them up in this position of a deity.
Absolutely.
That what you say and what you do will always be right, and that you do have to make these decisions solo, and that you do have to lead the family solo, and that you are responsible for things that both of us should be shouldering, that we cannot be in partnership. We cannot be so connected where we're picking up either person's slack based on the goals we set for ourselves. And it also, again, it denies my purpose, my humanity, my spirituality, when every thought is deferred to somebody. Like, what then is my purpose in this relationship if you're literally just telling me what to do? What then is my purpose?
Well, and then what then is my purpose is exactly the statement that we need to consider. If God wanted you to just be an android and just do whatever somebody else told you to do, he wouldn't have created you as an individual. There would be no need for you, and then we, as a culture and society, have really bought into the idea that women exist for the sole purpose of serving men. And so there's a lot there.
That makes me think about a question. I think this is what you're leading to. What then is the purpose of submission, right? What is the purpose? Because when I wrote that question, I said, I don't have the answer. I sincerely don't have the answer when I think about how we understand submission in the traditional sense, right? Not how we described it, not in terms of that reciprocating, because I think reciprocating, I'll call it reciprocating submission, if that makes sense. Made up that word. But in reciprocating submission, I think there is a beauty in that, right? There is a level of trust, a level of intimacy that I can let go, and I can trust another human being with this part of me, whether it's emotion, spiritual, physical. And also that even in that space that we're still trusting God, and that also that either one of us is humble enough and vulnerable enough to say, you know what, this this ain't my area, you know. Go ahead and take the lead on that. I think that is a beautiful thing. But then when I think about how we have as a society has come to understand submission, what is its purpose?
I mean, honestly, most people would love to be in any relationship where they can completely trust another person enough to make decisions for them. You know, the purpose of submission is from my understanding, is supposed to be for protection, right? You know, you are submitted to, you know, a greater power authority. Like when I think about being submitted to God, I may not understand how everything is working together for my good, but I trust that it is going to work together for my good, even when I am uncertain about the details, right? And so I think that in relationships, trust needs to be earned, and you need to show that you are trustworthy. I think the issue has been for so long, there's been this level of entitlement where regardless of if a man is trustworthy or not, you are to submit to him. And that has resulted in countless women experiencing violence and harm in their relationships. And we're just not in those times right now. And so there's this power struggle back and forth now, where you have women who are speaking up and you have men who think that they're speaking up too, saying, but I'm a man, I'm entitled to this. And it's just like, well, you need to do some work here. You know, historically speaking, men have been able to get away with not having substance and lacking, you know, in all domains. You know, they've been able to get away with lacking in all domains and still get the best of the best women simply because they are a man. And nowadays, now that women are able to provide for ourselves, and now that we are building our own businesses and our own empires, and we are buying our own houses, the idea of someone coming in and mishandling what you have worked hard to build is scary. And the fact that someone would think that they are entitled to just come in and take over after you have had to manage your life for this long, it's asinine. I mean, you use wisdom when you come into these situations. It's not, you know, that, oh, you know, I want to be in control and I want to do this, that, and the other. It's, I have had to be in control and I have had to take care of myself. And I need to be able to trust that if I sit this thing down on you, you have the capacity to carry it, because this thing is heavy.
Listen, to carry it, to respect it, to honor it, to know what it is, to care for it. And I'm not saying you got to care for it just like I got to care for it, but you got to know what you got to know. And when you even say set this thing down, to expand on that, we're talking about everything. We're not just talking about a business. We're talking about my heart. We're talking about my spirit. We're talking about my physical body.
Across all domains. You want me to trust you? You need to show yourself as trustworthy across all domains. And guess what? I don't have unrealistic expectations of you to meet my needs in these ways, right? I can carry, you know, myself. And if you want to come in and help support and do that, I am here for it. Do you hear me? I really am here for it. But I want you to genuinely have the capacity to do that, and then not just be lip service and love bombing. Because there are a lot of men who will come in and tell you what they think you want to hear in order to get with you in the ways that they want to get with you. And then they underperform. And it's to your detriment.
Listen.
And then so, so that is why women that I know, or I can just speak for myself, that I personally have some fears around submitting, so to speak. Because my whole thing is like, why are we even talking about this word? Like, what is that even about? You know what I mean? I think that we need to just come to a conclusion to do what works for us. I don't want to stumble and fall over, antiquated and outdated terms that, you're trying to build a foundation on that don't work for us.
Yeah. Because I think about it like this. So when we were talking about like the different domains, when we were talking about spirituality, my faith, when we were talking about my physical body, when we were talking about like the emotional capacity, just to unpack some of those things, like it's not funny, but it's funny. This guy was kind of talking about it too, about submission. He said, fellas, y'all want a woman to submit to you, but you couldn't lead yourself out of a wet paper bag.
Baby.
I said, yo. But then he talked about some of the things that you and I have consistently talked about. When we talk about doing the work, when we talk about going to therapy, we understand very much in relationships who you are, your trauma, who you are, the things you're dealing with become very present and become a part of the relationship. When we talk about trusting you, can I trust you enough that you are self-aware enough that you understand that what happened was a trigger of yours, or that was some unprocessed childhood trauma, and that it wasn't just me, right? And that you won't gaslight me when I tell you these things. That's a part of the emotional safety. It's not just loving me. Are you taking care of your stuff? And let's be clear, I'm not just holding this standard for men. I'm also holding the standard for women, or for myself as well, because I can do the same thing. I can project, but I can project. I can have childhood traumas. I can do all that to you. But the thing about it is, the reason why we're talking about this is because I don't ask for submission, and because Danielle, and that I know that women are more emotionally intelligent and evolved because they're allowed by society to be emotional, but
Absolutely.
also because we do the work.
We do the work. And you have far too many men who are more interested in parading their masculinity around for other men and doing what's impressionable or impressive to other men than they care about doing what's best in their relationship. And so it's like, you are committed to invalidating my experience whenever I try to hold you accountable for anything.
I don't think that people understand, Danny, the weight of when someone invalidates your experience, and how that is literally telling someone that who you are does not matter. So when I bring something to you in a relationship as a woman, and you invalidate it for whatever reason, because I'm a man and I say so, or because I ain't had that experience, that literally eats away at my humanity. That eats away at who I am. And you're the person that's doing it.
Our experiences are primarily with Black men. And so I'm just going to say this, and it's going to be what it is. I don't understand how you don't understand that as a Black man, because as a Black man experiencing racism, disenfranchisement, being hitting glass ceilings, being in conversations with people where they use dog whistle politics, and then being gaslighted by society and other people telling you that it's not white supremacy, that it's not racism, that you aren't being disenfranchised, because you can't prove that you didn't get the job because you were Black. You can't prove that you didn't get the promotion because, like, come on now. I don't see how you don't understand that. We just had Judge Ketanji Brown confirmed there is only one sitting Supreme Court justice
that has similar qualifications to her. She is more qualified than everybody else. The audacity of 47 people to vote nay. Why? You can't tell me that ain't because she Black. The audacity of you. Yeah. You know, so I don't understand when we have men who say that they don't understand what gaslighting feels like. You experience gaslighting too. You experience people telling you that you don't know what it's like to be a Black man and to have your experience, to be treated as subhuman. You know, to be treated as if you are less than, and to not have your experiences validated as a man. And you turn around and you do the same thing to your women. There needs to be some accountability. And that's why I said, what is going on with you? What have you normalized? I believe it's because you have normalized all those things, right? And now it's showing up in your relationships. And you need to go and do the work, because most Black people have complex PTSD, complex trauma. There's multiple layers to this that you need to unpack in therapy so that it's not showing up in abusive and violent ways in your relationships. When you aren't intending to harm your partner and the people that you love, but they are experiencing harm from stuff that you just think is normal. And it's not.
And it's not all physical. I know you say violence and abuse, but just being clear, you're not solely talking about physical violence and abuse.
I'm talking about spiritual, emotional. You know, it doesn't all have to be physical or sexual. People experience more physical and more mental and emotional violence in relationships than they do anything else. Yeah. Which oftentimes is a lot worse. Our bodies can handle a lot, but our brains, man, like in the way that our bodies store that type of emotional trauma, then we start to have a physiological response to that.
The body keeps score.
The body keeps score. And that is why it's so important for people to do their work. But people are not willing to do their work. There are far too many men who feel entitled to have healthy relationships without doing adequate work to make sure that they have those. And so when you show up and you say, submit to me, and, you know, and it's just like, sit down. Submit to what? Submit to who? Can you submit to Jesus? Matter of fact, can you submit to yourself? Can you submit to your own well-being? Can you make sure that you have your spiritual health, your mental health, and your physical health in order? Have you submitted to you to make sure that you have the capacity to show up in this space and make that type of demand of me to submit to you?
And listen, when I think about, and I keep bringing it back to emotional, and I'm gonna bring it back to spiritual as well. But when we think about, you know, a family, if you haven't done the work of managing your emotions, of expressing your emotions, how you gonna deal with a 2-year-old?
How, Sway? You know how they're gonna deal with these 2-year-olds? They're gonna do what has been done historically. They be beating these babies. And they don't use, you know, they don't use other parenting tools. Yeah. A lot of people have, you know, you beat kids into submission. When you potty training them, even dogs. I mean, you hit them or you spank them when they don't do what it is that they're supposed to do. So you instill fear and shame into them instead of freedom, you know, to express who they are, and freedom to communicate what their needs are, right?
Because I even think that the heart of all of this, Danny, is control, and not being able to, well, I don't say the heart of it, but the end result, the desire of it is to get what you desire out of your partner or out of your children or whomever it is, but not really being able to step into freedom. Because if you do those things, right? If you are in a relationship with Cameo, if you are in a relationship with Danny, and the trust is there emotionally, the trust is there spiritually, the trust is there physically, right? And trust does not mean perfection. Let's be clear. Trust doesn't mean perfection. It means I know who you are. You're honest about who you are, that there's vulnerability there, and you are that person consistently in this space. It also means that you're honoring yourself and you're honoring me. But I say all that to say, if the trust is there in those spaces. The type of cameo you gonna get and the type of Danny. Listen, you gonna ask me one question, cameo. Can you jump? How high?
How
high? What you want me to wear? How far you want me to jump?
Listen, I want to be able to trust. I want to be able to submit. I am not just being difficult, but it definitely needs to be submission worthy.
Yeah.
Trustworthy. And that's what a lot of people are saying. But there are still too many people who are willing to endure just the worst of things for the sake of being in their relationship. And that's just not the type of relationship I'm going to be in.
Yeah. Well, I hope if you're listening to this, I hope this pricked your heart a little bit, right? Made you examine how you use the word submission, how you understand it, and how it shows up in your relationship. I always welcome other thoughts, comments, perspectives when it comes to submission. Maybe not, because I'm pretty set on this one. Maybe not. I'm pretty set on this one.
We had a well-rounded conversation about submission, what our fears are, why, submission is important, and how society views it. I think that it's a well-rounded perspective. I think that there is safety in submission, and we kind of talked about that. Mm-hmm. But you have to actually have the capacity to do the job, bruh.
Mm-hmm. Bruh, I'm listening. Daddy, they don't get it. I don't know if they get it, or I don't know if they want to do the work. Like you said, it's entitlement. You think I'm just supposed to show up and just know, just be how high? No, brother. Everybody don't get that. Why do you think you're entitled to that part of me? Do you understand that part of me is sacred? Do you understand that part, I cannot get time back, that I can't get some of these things back that I'm giving to you? Do you not get that? But you just expect, just because you got an eggplant between your legs, that I'm supposed to.
Or you want to do something that's unhealthy for my body, and I'm just supposed to do that.
Anyway. Be sure you are following us on Instagram, and be sure Instagram and like us on Facebook. Also, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Last thing and most important thing, if you have a confession or a question, make sure you let me know. You can slide in my DMs. You can head to the website, goodgirlpodcast.com, or you can just leave a comment, right? We want to make sure that we're answering your questions and we're getting at the heart of your confession. So thank you so much for listening to the Good Girl Podcast.